here. I'm going to click the record button. But it's great to see everyone here. Let's see, we've got Carrie, Kyle, great to see you. Chief Z, great to have you here. Peter Darley, as always. Vanessa, I see you join in. Vita, Teeks, great to talk to you earlier today. And now again here. Joe, what a treat it is. Oh, and man, we got Gary Breeze joining. You know it's a good day when Gary Breeze is in the house. Welcome, Gary. Welcome, Emily. Everyone, it's so great to have you here. We're still about a minute early. So I'm just actually guess now it's 3:30 Central Time on the dot. And so we're going to get started here in just about a minute. And know that this is being recorded. And I encourage everyone, if you want to have your video on, it's not necessary, but please make sure that your microphone is off unless you're speaking later in the half. And just to kind of get us started here and to give a little context, I'm also might as well share my screen super quick just to give a little bit of context on what we're talking about here today. You'll see this all throughout the event, but really excited today to be talking about myths and opportunities about leadership in the fire service. This is great. We got more people rolling in. And the point of these roundtable conversations is really meant to be two-way. This is meant to be a conversation. This is not like a podcast. This is not like a webinar. No death by PowerPoint. But we're very lucky today to have my partner in crime, Kirk McKenzie, along with two really awesome distinguished guests, Chief Bob Horton and Chief Jeff Buchanan, to talk about this conversation of myths and opportunities about leadership in the fire service. I have copied this whole format 100%. Shout out to Gary Breeze about this idea of these roundtable talks. So the point of these conversations is really meant to be two-way. And Darley, sponsor of Smart Firefighting, has been a huge proponent of leadership and actually hosted a competition about leadership in the fire service. We actually have the two winners of the competition here, Kyle Henderson, excuse me, I'm mixing names, Kyle Matusik and Carrie Henderson, excuse me, who are here today. And thank you for being here. We'd love to have you guys give a chat earlier. But leadership is a little bit of a funny and challenging topic where it's something that we've beaten from many angles, talked about in excess, but it's kind of a hard thing to learn. You kind of have to kind of absorb it from some of your mentors. And I've been fortunate to learn from the Paul and Pierre Darleys of the world, the Gary Breezes, the Chief Z's of the world. So that's how I've learned. And now I want to ultimately, my job is to be a facilitator and then and bring in others as we're going to continue to talk about this topic here today. So final ground rules is keep your cameras on if you want. Please keep your audio on whenever you talk. I don't really need to ask this group, but just continue to be respectful. And this is meant to be for all of you. So once the speakers are done talking, be selfish, ask questions. I encourage everyone as well while we're going here right now, fire up the chat. Where are you from? I believe the chat is open. Yep. So where are you from? What brings you here? And we'll get going. So I will first hand it over to my fellow, as I said, partner in crime, brother from another mother, mentor, friend, Kirk. If you want to lead us off on some of your experience and thoughts on leadership, and then we'll shoot it over to Jeff and Bob, followed by the opened conversation. So Kirk.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate you having me here. It's been said that some leaders many or most leaders need curiosity, foresight, determination, and some have even been described as mavericks. Traits coupled with emotional intelligence, or sometimes described as EQ for emotional quotient, are important attributes of leaders. And so I have a couple slides on some of the leaders I've appreciated, like the Vanderheidens, who were clearly out of the box thinking when they went from buckets to fire hoses in the late 1600s. Now, 300 years later, we're still arguing about the size and shape of the water, but nonetheless, what can we learn from the old school leaders in our industry and adjacent industries? Like, what if you thought, gee, I want to be the first person to cross Antarctica, and I'm going to gather a group of people together, and I'm going to let them know right up front, safe return is doubtful, and get stuck in the ice for 2 years. How does one lead through adversity, which we see in the fire rescue public safety industry? One of my favorite leaders in the space, Those who knew him well addressed him as Bruno, but Chief Brunacini, I had the pleasure of meeting just a few times. But what an incredible leader and somewhat of a maverick, some might say. And I'm going to put this deck in the chat, or Kevin, I know you'll send things out later, and everything's hyperlinked here. A favorite recent read, Special Operations Command, was led by Admiral McCraven, and some incredible leadership stories here that, again, adjacent to our work in public safety, nonetheless, I think inspiring. Casey Grant and the team at NIST NFPA helped lead the Maverick Drive for SMART, which of course is my one thing I like to really focus on, and really glad Wingspread 7, actually the significant statement number 11 was specifically about how do we move the ball forward, because we've identified in the past we don't have the information we need to make good decisions. How do we move forward? Here's a recent top 10 priority lists for from the state, the Association for State Chief Information Officers. Great list, hard work ahead of us to do, but inspiring. And it actually was Dr. Paul Grimwood was, I'm robbing the Mavericks discussion he posted last week online about, hey, we leaders often need to be a bit mavericks, and his Euro firefighter website has some of the best in-depth information that somebody who's been leading the charge for I think 50 years or more has done. And so, Kevin, thanks for letting me share some of the people I like to follow, and I really appreciate it. Since you've got some real pros on the show here, let me turn it back to you and let them get started.
Thanks, Captain. Much appreciated. And as I said to everyone, fire up the chat. Right now, we're going to turn it over to Jeff and Bob, Chief Buchanan and Chief Horton, to talk about this topic, and want you to think about questions. We'll be sending out everything afterwards. So I will now turn it over to you, Jeff.
Well, first, just thanks, Kevin, for even thinking about having me and Bob on the show. It's an honor. It's a privilege to be here and just chat it up, to be honest with you. Love the way you frame it. I love the way you frame the show, missing opportunities. And maybe I'm going to be a bit of a defeatist, because there's a lot more myths out there sometimes than I think are opportunities. But certainly there is a lot of avenues in regards to leadership. But let me just give you a little bit of background just about myself, not what I did, but kind of my whole journey in leadership. In qualifier, and let me just put it out there, I am not a guru on leadership. I study it. I feel like I'm in the zone as far as being a student of the game, but I have more to learn than I have learned, but still love the ability to share. And where it started for me, at least 10, 15 years ago, and some of my first opportunities into leadership, is I was reading all the books, and I love to read, but I was reading books about some killer Navy SEALs, some cool generals and admirals, coaches, and a bunch of people that I knew I would never be. I'm just a dude, and now in the fire service, and I'm not trying to be like anybody. I'm trying to be me, but I'm just trying to extract out, what are these men and women doing that's putting them in an avenue for success? And frankly, it took me quite a few books and a lot of really paying attention to realize I'm not going to be those individuals. And that's really where I stumbled upon really kind of three things that I like to involve myself on, and where I think it helps my behaviors and thinking about other people's behaviors in regards to leadership. In those three areas, instead of reading about individuals, which I haven't totally discarded, mind you, I read about behavior economics, why people make the decisions that they do, psychology, and I do like to understand, I don't want to overstate this, but the neuroscience behind it. What's the brain doing in regard to some of these behaviors? So that's really about my my journey. But particularly when it comes to me and Bob, bringing him early on into the conversation, me and this cat go back almost 2 decades. As we were hacking our way, I was the hack, actually. I was the hack. in paramedic school, and Bob was, he was flirting with valedictorian. Were you valedictorian, Bob?
The salutatorian.
Yeah. He was just only the second dude. He was only the second guy. But our conversations went back a long time ago when we started talking about leadership, and it's just great to be here having a conversation. Bob, I mean, what was it about? What was it in your journey as we're talking, through leadership, and as we've gone through each other's careers? What was it? What was your kind of bright light that turned on for you?
Well, and Jeff and I were always inspired by change. Like, we were always inspired to work towards innovation in whatever space that we could find ourselves into. And, and leadership is so broad, and I'll level set for a second. I'm much more leaning that leadership is an art than a science, but I think you could make a good case on the other side of that spectrum if we were using your balance we have here. I'm on the more of the side of an art. And what are we leading, and what are we leading to? And I think sometimes we get so zoomed in on maybe different leadership theories, which are all useful, or a certain style. Let me call it leadership styles, because you hear so much of folks who sort of zoom in, grab that one leadership style and say, I'm a transformational leader, I'm a servant leader, I am a authentic leader, right? And really the leaders that Kirk highlighted at the beginning have all of that, right? They have all of that in the toolbox, and they know how to grab at different tools when they need them for different situations. And I'll get into it a little bit later. Jeff, let me turn it back into you to go through some of these competencies. But I'm worried and inspired at the same time, if you will, about the future of the fire service in terms of leadership. Let me leave a teaser for a second and let you go through this, Major.
Well, let me first crack on on a couple myths. And I think that this is so important. It doesn't matter what your position is in the organization. Once you walk in the fire department, you're in a leadership organization. But I get it. We're in a hierarchical system. It's paramilitary. We know all the colloquialisms. Got it. We're filled with titles. But the reality is, you can be in a leadership role right from the moment you enter the organization. And I think myth number one to bust up: doesn't matter if you're captain, if you're fire chief, pick one, pick a title. You don't get the book. You don't get the book of all the answers to all the situations. And, oh man, great, now I'm here and someone's going to tell me how to do this. It ain't there. It isn't there. And the reality is, I don't care who you are, how studied you are, how educated you are. If you had the best mentor, you're going to experience failure. People aren't going to like certain things that you say. And you're going to have to work all through these things. And you're going to have to adopt, adapt, and fall in love with trial and error. You're going to have to do that. And for me, and I love the way you set it up, Bob. I love the way you set it up. And there are thousands of leadership styles. And this was part of my problem. All right, man, transformational sounds super cool, but oh, wait, what about situational? Oh, wait, what about servant leadership? Okay, well, I couldn't figure out something that I could do. And that's where, through those kind of three concepts that I try to concentrate on, because I'm a work in progress, I'm at the potter's wheel, pick it. I'm trying to be a better dude. And at that, and a better father, a better husband, a better brother, friend, all of it, right? And so as I looked at, particularly honing in on psychology or behavior economics, emotional intelligence is what stuck out for me. And okay, I need something that I can practice. I'm a model guy. And when I mean model, I'm talking about like a paradigm, like something I can follow. And EQ was something that I think is simple. You can remember it and you can build on it, because from my theory is, if you don't have a model, you can't repeat it. And if you can't repeat something, you can't get really, really good at it. You're not going to get perfect, but you can gain mastery if you have something to look at. And EQ just, it kind of has it all for me. And, when you look at just a simple model, and, I don't think that this roundtable really necessitates that we dive in and flow through the model, but if you looked at each one of those words on that screen, could you ask yourself, I know what that means, and could I try to get better at it? Do I really comprehend it? And I think for the most part, that answer is yes. Could you be emotionally self-aware? Could you learn how to influence people? Could you get better at teamwork, empathy, pick it? And to me, those are the things I try to work on. Yep. I mean, my wife will tell me all the time, sometimes I don't have the emotional self-awareness, particularly when I'm doing the parent thing, right? I mean, I might get a little bit too accelerated. I might be going a little bit too WWE in a situation where I'm bringing in, some emotion for, particularly if, something isn't going right. But, it's just really about managing all those. And, when you look at this, from my standpoint, Bob, how many situations have you come into where you have been coaching people that are looking up to you, and how has that worked out for you? Because I know that right now, and Bob's a humble cat. He's got people, and I know he lives in Oregon, but he's got people in Southern Nevada that reach out to him and they want to hear what he has to say. How does that strike with you, Bob, when you're coaching someone, and how do you use that as a tool to bring them along?
Sure. And I appreciate that nod. It's always interesting and grateful. I'm always grateful to help try other people solve their problems and having to deal with my own, which is why we always need a stable of folks, right, that we're contacting when we're dealing with that kind of stuff. It's my goal when I'm mentoring, if that was the question, Jeff, if I understood it right, is get folks to think about how they might be wrong. How might you think about whatever your situation is differently? Yeah, and you may land on the same decision or outcome or path or whatever it is, but be deliberate about the choices you are leaving on the table. And I think sometimes we see this, and it kind of gets to some of the bias that we have as human beings, cognitive bias, that is what I'm speaking to, where we just anchor in and confirm, or try to find evidence to further confirm a direction that we've already made a decision on. And I think a strength in leadership is humility, willingness to be wrong, and asking yourself that question: how might I be wrong about this situation? Seek evidence that might verify that. So when I'm mentoring folks, that's where I try to put energy into them, is make a case for me that, not prosecuting that you're right, but starting to think about how you might be wrong.
Yeah, I love it. And I feel like there's a reference in there to Adam Grant and Think Again, which I know you're a big fan, and really just trying to recalculate or recalibrate what we're talking about, and really building on what you're saying. Let me just say, that's a big, I totally agree. And to really avoid, I'm reaching back here a bit. Think Happy Days, think my man Fonzie, when he couldn't say he was sorry, right? Be ready to say you're sorry. It's like, hey, I made a mistake. I get it. Whatever the situation is, I didn't mean to do it. I'm going to try to be better. And I think that that's a huge, Kevin, going back to the setup from you and Kurt in this whole thing, is it's a myth that you're going to be this infallible man or woman sitting at the top of the organization, and you're not going to be wrong. Newsflash, you're going to be wrong a lot. You're going to be wrong a lot. And you're going to have to get real nice and comfy with being wrong. And I think it's so important to say you're sorry, particularly when people's feelings get hurt. There's just nothing wrong, in my opinion, about having that vulnerability. Although I think it's something that's absent in at least a portion of the teaching, in this very, we call it this alpha environment, all this machismo, and I get it. But the reality is, from a leadership standpoint, from my perspective, so important to know that you got limitations, and that, again, you're going to be wrong quite a bit. And where I'm going with that, Kevin, is, kind of segueing back in, you bring this really cool perspective from not growing. I mean, you're supporting the fire service in so many ways, and I know you're even broader than the fire service. I see some of the things on LinkedIn that you're involved in, some really cool problem solving. And how do you connect those dots from outside the fire service to inside? Like, are you bringing, like, where are you learning and how are you applying it in some of the things that you're doing?
I appreciate your co-moderation skills, but to that, I think the two things that come to mind is when looking across public safety, there's this universal vision and shared mission to help each other, especially amongst whether it's police, whether it's EMS, whether it's fire. I believe we're all on the same team. We all want everyone to be able to go out, do their job safely, help the community, and come back safer. But I personally credit one thing that I've seen is Dr. Lori Moore Merrill's leadership. She's had this new mission from the USFA of one voice. And so within one voice, it's sort of, hey, let's check your egos at the door. I don't care if you're from a 2 or 5-letter agency. I don't care if you're a firefighter, a captain, a chief. I don't care if you're in police, EMS, like we're all on the same team and we're all striving for the same goal. And so I think just from a leadership perspective, having someone like Dr. Lori that says that trickles down. And I've seen that at the TSI conference in October, the recent immersive learning summit that was at a couple weeks ago. There's no egos. The amount of just willingness to want to help each other is really inspiring. And then I'm also very inspired about how do we take intel and technology from other industries and bring it in. That tech transfer is a little bit of a different conversation, but it's still just the message to the entrepreneurs on this call of Lori also talked to me about the power of listening and actually having conversations with firefighters and public safety personnel, and tying that back into actually figuring out how to apply technology to the problem. So that's my personal lived experience of what I've seen, and would love if you had any other thoughts or comments on that before we open it up here in a little bit.
Bob, did you want to go?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I love those thoughts, and I think that those perspectives are so important, because a lot of times I think that inside the fire service we get tunnel visioned into thinking that, well, these characteristics, these traits, the importance of leadership is only important here, and I think we're all on the same page that it transcends any one industry, it transcends any one environment, and it really, these are serviceable traits that can be used to benefit, whether it be an organization, a relationship, anywhere and really everywhere. And so I just like hearing those perspectives for sure.
Jeff, could you share a little bit? Sorry, Kevin, now I'm co-moderating too, for crying out loud.
Hey, beautiful thing.
When we get into this mode, I got to hear from Jeff, the role of follower-ship and good leadership. Can you cover that in a couple of minutes?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because I think that's again a myth, Kevin, myth. It's one of these myths that I think that are go unsung, unsaid. And if you are not a good employee, then I believe it's very hard to be good in a leadership role, because the traits to be a good employee, or let's talk about followership, are remarkably the same when it comes to being open and honest and being curious and wanting to learn and wanting to do a good job and being devoted and committed. These are all some similar traits that we look for when we're trying to be really good at this thing called leadership. So I think that it starts from where you're at. And that's where I come back to. It doesn't matter where you come to the organization. Again, I know we're talking about a fire department, but if your first instinct is to be a good employee, you're setting yourself up to at least be open to taking on a leadership role at some point. It's very rarely that I personally have seen it. And of course, examples do exist of individuals who I worked alongside of, and then they promoted, and now all of a sudden, they're enlightened and they're changed and they're open and they're honest and they're empathetic. Generally, in what my experience has been, if you're not empathetic from a followership standpoint, you can't just turn that bad boy on when you get into a role of more significance. And so, in a nutshell, I think, really distilling down followership is being someone that's a good employee wherever you're at, absent a cool title or one of formality. So it's really about being someone who's of high character, and that you want to, you want to be a good employee. I'm coming here to do a good job. And that means being open-minded. I know that most people don't want to deal with change, but I'm going to try to be really, really receptive to that. I'm going to come to you with recommendations of how to solve problems. And I'm not just going to give you problems, and really, really, really trying to lead from wherever it is that you're at.
Kudos, Jeff and Bob. Thank you, and Kirk as well for starting us off. And we're about 25 minutes in, with at least 35 minutes to go. And this is really where it's supposed to continue to be fun, two-way engaging conversation in this kitchen table style. And I look around the room and see some really inspiring leaders. And as I mentioned, the two winners from the Darley essay competition, Kyle Matusik and Carrie Henderson here, along with Chief C and some of these other faces I've never seen before. And Gary Breeze, who inspired me in some of the way to kind of create this, and fellow entrepreneurs. Like I see Sam come on camera. But I want to, and thank you, Rick, as well. But Kyle and Carrie, I'm kind of putting you both on the spot because you're kind of on the speaking tour now. What kind of just chime in here with what maybe a kind of drop in 2 cents, or if you got a good question that we can use to get it going. But you two are kind of a 1-2 punch now. But Kyle and Carrie, kind of would love to hear from both of you, and maybe quick intro too of kind of your name and your department.
Kyle, you want to go first?
Looks like he's on mute.
All right, well, I'm off mute. I'm Carrie Henderson. I work for James City County Fire Department, which is a suburbs of Williamsburg, Virginia. And Kyle and I are currently at the Virginia Fire Rescue Conference speaking tomorrow about some leadership stuff, very similar stuff to what everybody's talking about. A couple of things that come to mind for me. I think, Jeff, you were talking about being willing to say you're sorry. And I think culturally, at least in my department, we've gotten a lot better at that. But what I think we haven't gotten better at as a generation is fixing the behaviors that got you there in the first place. So I hear a lot of people say, I'm sorry. And I think that's a beautiful first step. But you often end back up in that same office conversation of, I'm sorry again, because I didn't correct myself in my behaviors of what made me have to say sorry in the first place. So I think that's something when we talk about leadership and we teach leadership and we talk about empathy is don't get yourself back in there, or those sorries become kind of vacant or empty.
Kyle, I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Matusik. I'm a lieutenant, Oak Brook, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago, a smaller, very affluent community. Met Carrie not too long ago, and we're having the time of our lives now, kind of spread a good word out there and kind of forward thinking, innovative along the lines of what you all have been talking about. And I think the cool thing with leadership is we progress as leaders. So does what we think about leadership. It's never, this is our idea, this is what I'm sticking with for the next 20 years. We kind of grow with the environments, and one of the biggest things I've started to realize is your identity, and I think in the fire service, a lot of people struggle with that identity and who they really are. We define ourselves by the uniform we wear, or by being a parent or a husband or a wife. But what is your identity is what you bring to the table. So all of us here are leaders. So that's one, and then what else do you bring and how can we build on that? Because no one person is the same. So when we look at identity, it's doing that self-reflection of who am I? And then how do I get people to learn who they are? And then that allows them to become more authentic. Jeff, I just want to hit on one thing, just from experience that you mentioned, when you get promoted and all of a sudden you want to be empathetic and you can't because you weren't before. Well, my story is, early on in my career, I'm a veteran too, you know, and I kind of brought this hardcore, high standard, do this or else approach into the fire service. And I went through some personal struggles and kind of hit rock bottom, and it kind of turned my entire life around. And I made a lot of mistakes, you know, and I treated people poorly. I didn't lead them appropriately of what they need to do to succeed. And now, you know, being older and a little wiser and going through those experiences and learning more, you know, trying to overcome those mistakes and be this new person in a small organization such as mine is even more challenging. So my goal now is, you know, I don't want people to make the same mistakes I did. Let's teach these people young how to have empathy, how to have compassion, because that's really strength. How to be vulnerable, that's strength. And that in turn, you know, the goal is to create better human beings. And if we create better human beings, we're going to create better firefighters. So that's what we're all doing here. And we constantly challenge each other and build and grow. And, you know, that's what myself and Carrie enjoy talking about. And I think it's some great points on, you know, what we can do and how we view leadership and what we need to do to, you know, continually grow in that aspect.
Jeff and Bob, you want to give some comments on that? And then I want to just keep going around the horn here. This is Kyle and Carrie. You obviously know what you're talking about. Thank you. But Jeff and Bob and Kirk as well, comments, and then we're going to continue to get feedback from the audience here.
Yeah, I'd like to say, Kyle, I to your point about having identity, I had someone, a friend of mine, and I can't give proper credit to where he heard it from, but it just resonates with me. If who you are is what you do, who are you when you're not? If you are designed and your identity is what you do in life, then it's going to be difficult. And I think it starts with, again, another point that you made, Kyle, is for me and for anybody around me, you know, I say kids, or if I'm in a leadership role, I start big. I'm trying to be a good human being, and then it narrows from there. I'm trying to be a good husband, a father, a friend, a brother, all those types of things. But it starts with being a good person. And I think that does get lost sometimes, especially because of the job and all the pressures that are there. But I think it does help keep you calibrated. It does help keep your focus when you're like, wait a second, I am a human being. I'm going to be fallible. And I agree with all those comments that are being made. You're right. And I'm sorry is empty. It has to do with accountability. I made a mistake. But where I'm going with that is apologize. I'm owning the mistake. Because it takes a lot for people to admit both mistakes and apologies. And I think that they both can have power. But no doubt, if all you do is apologize, it can become white noise and an excuse.
I want to throw in a little. Yes, I love what you guys are saying, and I love this conversation about identity. And I'm going to let some of my jadedness show at this point, because the identity, and I'm looking at identity just ever so slightly different. My experience in the fire services, we are so anchored in an identity of what we want to be. And I'm going to generalize the entire fire service for a minute, and we can walk it back as we need to, of what we think or what we sell, or what people think they sign up for. Reference to an article I wrote last year, a couple of years ago, that I think this is really challenging the future of the fire service, is these anchored in identities of what a firefighter used to be and what we think a lot of folks think it ought to be in the future. The point I like to add when we talk about leadership, and I, you know, we've done a sort of a good job in our education of separating like management and leadership. So much so that it seems like there's this adversarial wall between the notion of managing and this notion of leading. And I don't see us really embracing the overlap if we're writing Venn circles out, because to run an organization, you rallying the troops is one piece of it, but being a sound administrator is as well. And that's sort of leading the organization into a future, sometimes an uncertain future. And that's where we run into points of conflict. So the piece I like to add when we talk about leadership is managing expectations. How do we as leaders manage the expectations of those folks that are around us? My experience in the fire service is that firefighters expect perfect every time you do anything. Like you roll a product out the door. If it doesn't function exactly as designed, They will flat reject it and say that was stupid. Oh, we did that 10 years is stupid. You know, and I've been so blessed to be able to work with the Western Fire Chiefs Association. And I see so many great friends of the Western Chiefs, including our senior operations advisor, Chief Z, on the call today. I've learned a lot about the partnerships we have with private sector entities. And I learned a lot about the terminology minimally viable product. Right. And then in this business world where you're developing innovation, it's you have a culture of experimentation. You have a culture of curiosity, and it's put it out into the market, read what the market tells you, and adapt and revise and build. My experience in the fire service is absolutely not that. Right. There was no curiosity or experimentation. It was, if this PCR didn't make my work exactly the way you said it was going to, like, we're going to have mutiny. But I acknowledge, I let my jadedness show a little bit. I'll let others speak, and then at the wrap up, I'll talk about why I'm worried about that.
Love the continued fluid, meandering conversation going on here, and I'm looking at people on camera, and I see Rick, Sam, Chief Z, Reno, Joseph. Sam, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I've been taking notes. This is so great, guys. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I wanted to touch on a couple of things. Big one, like when Carrie was mentioning sort of the sorry thing that a lot of other people, I think, resonated with, that helped me as a leader, especially through working with a lot of working groups on standards and things like that in the technology space where you've got some personalities. It is this understanding what your impact is over your intention. And so when you're apologizing, there's a really big difference when somebody has defensiveness and they're like, well, that wasn't my intention. That's not what you're apologizing for, right? You have to apologize about your impact. So it's something that, I have to work on with my mom, and I work on in my relationships, that so we don't have this like triggering conversations where just like the way someone asks you a question, you're just like, like just so frustrated. And I think it's a lot of the time we have to understand what our impact is. So impact over intention, just like a big, like, impact is greater than intention, is something I have on a Post-it note that I just like keep in mind, especially for sort of conflict resolution. And on the identity, I've never been a firefighter. But I really, like Kevin, want to support the fire service, and I really care about, there's a quote in the Bible, seek first the kingdom of God. And I interpret that as, make sure you want to hang out with the people that you're going to work with and be with and spend time with, right? Like, make sure you care about the same things. And one thing that made me realize I wanted to work more closely with the fire service was, I was observing a training that was happening from the fire trainers in Vancouver at C-SPAN, which is a shipyard here, where they were helping build an internal fire brigade at the shipyard. And this guy was talking about how he's like, yeah, we've got these like young women that are fresh out of business school as our chiefs now. And I thought he was about to say something like super sexist, and he's like, and it's fucking great, man. Like, they like have all these leadership skills, and they just like listen, and there's no hierarchies, and like, and it just like made me laugh so hard, because I was expecting this kind of like, and they've never seen fire before kind of attitude, right? And it was like, and they were just like pouring their hearts out about how much easier it was to have somebody who was solely focused on leadership and like really making sure everybody was being, like, to other people's points, a good employer. Like, I interpret that as a good team member, meaning that like it kind of matters how you show up. And then just to that identity piece, like, I think a lot of us tie our identity to perfectionism and certain things that show up as defensiveness and really don't make an inclusive culture, especially as leaders, because so building in something that just happened this week in my team, where I was, something kind of came to light on a Sunday when there was a deadline for a Monday kind of vibe. And I'm like, hey, what broke down here? And we, rather than this person coming in and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm the reason it broke down. It's like, no, you showed us that there wasn't a redundancy in place. Like, you didn't break down anything. Like, mistakes are inevitable, right? And so looking at managing expectations, like, take away people's anxiety, right? Like mistakes are going to happen. And like, that is always an opportunity to like, look at where we could have other people understanding your role, where we could have redundancies in place. And so those are just my thoughts and comments on everything so far. Thank you so much.
And Sam, 10 seconds. Tell us your role in the company you're with.
Yeah, so my company is Loci, and I'm the CEO, founder. My co-founders on the call, Vanessa. We build simulation software, so we make it really easy for expert trainers and people who want to give people drills or behavior-based training the tools to deliver that at the enterprise level and get insights and things like that. So we're always looking to collaborate with the fire service, especially in support of anything training for enterprises or for public spaces, to give them better tools to actually make sure people aren't slipping through the cracks, and that we're starting to like look more at the human design of safety information in public spaces. And fire is, just like I said, the seek first the people you want to hang out with, and it's like the people who have been the most willing to collaborate have been in the fire service. So that's sort of where we've sort of taken off. And if you look on our website, loci.ca or learnbyloci.com, it's same. You'll see Exit Test is something that we're working on with a few big customers that is really about making drills asynchronous so that people who miss them can still have the same kind of awareness. Making drills is a part of onboarding immediately, especially into manufacturing spaces or complex environments. And then also making those visualizations available to first responders like yourselves, so that when you come to a complex environment, you're getting a pre-visualization of where to go in a very just easy to digest video format of like visualizations of a map.
Thanks, Sam. So I want to continue to just rapid fire. We've got at least another 20 more minutes here. I'm looking at Chief Z, then Rick, and then I also see Joseph Minahan. So I'm going to go with those three, and then if anyone else has questions, and then of course Bob, Jeff, and Kirk chime in. But Chief Z, what do we got?
It's good so far, and I would tell you that I think leadership evolves much like our organizations and much like our careers do. One of the things that I think is really important is leadership's really about doing the right thing, and that's always the hardest thing to do sometimes. Within the fire service, you grow up, you're a firefighter, you go to an engineer, you become a company officer, captain, battalion chief, you move up to the ranks, and a lot of that time you're working with the same people, and it's really hard to hold people accountable. And it's really that double-edged sword, and some of the decisions you make along the way, some of those friends may not become friends anymore. They may, I just, put on a gold badge and went the other way, went to the dark side. And I think, much even like our politicians today, you really have to adjust and really have to make some things work. And, doing what's right is never easy. It's actually harder than anything else that comes along, but you end up being the soul of your organization. And I don't, fire service is one thing, but, look at Sam running her company. She's about, she wants to do a good product, but on the same end, she wants to turn a profit. She wants her people to be happy, wants her customers to be happy. And I think we're really evolving because we, even within, government as a whole, we have a lot more pressures and a lot more issues that, the folks came before us did not have. But, and I always use this as a good line. I said, I used to have a very educated deputy chief who used to tell me that we really need to hire more people with education. I said, well, that's not entirely true either. I said, I'm more interested in hiring people who get it done and are willing to do what's right and work for us. And I sometimes think that, most of all, we're looking for people with common sense in our organizations. And it can really, forecast and help us get down to where we need to. Being a leader doesn't mean you've got to be the smartest, sharpest person in the room. Hopefully, you've already hired those people to surround you, and you'll come up with an idea, you'll hand it off, and when it comes back to you, it'll look much different. And I look and I think of Rick sitting there, and I think, man, in his time coming up through a tough organization like CAL FIRE, he knows exactly what I mean during that process. But again, I think we evolve. We have to constantly adjust to where we need to be. But again, part of being a leader is having good people you can confide in that will tell you, when they think you're full of bullshit and or they believe you or don't believe you. And I think that really makes things work. The other person I have to recognize on here, Kevin, and you work with him every day, but Paul and his team at Darley, and I used to be one of the largest, by probably more pumps than a lot of other folks did back in the day when I was a chief. But I would tell you that I used to love Paul coming out every year, doing a one-on-one with me, including doing a one-on-one we'd be at conferences, and really, seeking what we saw, what we thought, and where we can make adjustments and changes. And I think, again, we've got customers within our own organization. We've got the customers we're supplying service to or a product to. And all that's got to come together very quickly. Okay, that's it.
Chief C, thanks for that. And I see, I want to continue to allow everyone to talk and give their 2 cents. And then, kudos to Paul. I mean, Paul has taught a lot to me about going and looking your customer in the face and shaking their hands and just sitting down and talking to them. And sometimes we can over engineer what leadership is, but in a lot of ways it's being a good person, it's asking the right questions and putting yourself in those shoes. So kudos to Paul and teaching me all that. But I want to, and Paul, if you want to chime in and say something, if you're available now, I guess I'll throw it to you. If not, I want to, I saw we got Scott and Rick. So I'll go first to Rick because it called you out, and then to Scott Esquit first. So and Rick, I was lurking your LinkedIn and saw a great quote you had of, we don't need a title to lead, we just need to care. People would rather follow a leader with a heart than a leader with a title. I really liked that quote, and I'm not saying that you should talk about that specifically, but Rick Griggs, I'm throwing it to you, and then we'll go to Scott Esquit and anyone else after that. Rick.
Thanks. And I also really appreciate what Chief Z had to say. Over the last 20 plus years, I've worked around him and watched what he did in building an organization like Cal OAS, especially from the Cal Fire side and the IMT side. And I think he really did lead an organization into the next century, into this century, next millennium and everything. And that was really important. And I think that him continuing where he is and all the different things that he's involved in now are huge. One of the things I put in a comment up there was, it takes adaptability to be a leader, but one of the challenges that I really think is that we're also organizationally, and it doesn't really matter where you are, an organization that's been around for 200 years, completely unimpeded by forward progress. We are generational. We pass things on generation to generation. And many of us came up in an authoritarian world where you were pounded into submission. Empathy was weakness. And now we get into this point where we've had a cultural shift in that. But somebody put up a comment earlier about the senior man comment or the senior person comment. And I heard a great quote, and I can't take credit for it because it was Danny McDonough from FDNY that spoke of this many years ago at a National Fallen Firefighters Everyone Goes Home symposium, was how do we change culture? Well, culture is generational. It's passed on from story and action and all that. But where did some of these people learn? I mean, we talk about, one of the easiest things to talk about is seatbelts when we're looking at leadership. There's not a person out there in the fire department today that are a young person that, a new hire, someone within 10 years of the career that was not brought up wearing a car seat till they were about 40 to 80 pounds, or 110 pounds. Now we have this thing where now they don't want to wear a seatbelt. Well, this is just an example, but that's because they've seen other people do it. The dinosaurs did it. We didn't wear seatbelts. We didn't do something. And Danny McDonough made this quote, and he said, what we have to do in order to change culture is stomp the dinosaur eggs, not let them hatch. Yes, there's great tradition and great value, but the bad habits that we've developed over the years are chasing us. And that comes out of leadership. Sometimes you have to be brave to be a leader. Leader's about courage. And there's some times where you've challenged some people at a courageous level, when you're in the leadership role. And it doesn't mean you have to front them off, but it's how you deal with that adversity and that adaptability. It's situational, and it's critical if you're going to be a leader that's there. Is there a time for compassion? Absolutely. And empathy? Absolutely, 100%. But there's also a time to be commanding and do what needs to be done and get it done. And that's where it comes down to. So that's kind of my 2 cents on leadership. And I believe that, you know, that's the challenge, is get some of these people to step up, but not lay the next generation of dinosaur eggs, but bring in the next generation of empathetic, smart leaders that are adaptable and transitional.
Well said, Rick. I want to throw it to Scott, and then I want to then let kind of the featured speakers as well kind of give some 2 cents. But Scott, welcome. How you doing? And introduce yourself and give us your 2 cents here.
Hey, Kev. All I can say is that I'm very lucky to have Rick Griggs on our team. We're both with Wildfire Defense Systems, and I had a policy and procedure. I met Kevin when I was working at Lexipol, heading up the fire content team. I'm an ex-chief. I'm an attorney. Real quick, I just wanted to say that when it comes to, you know, you have to continually measure yourself. You have to continually assess yourself as a leader. And the easiest way that I've found to do that through my career is by measuring the trust of my crews. And it's not that hard to do if you have the self-confidence to go ahead and try to get those measures. And you're going to be anywhere on a scale from negotiated trust to complete confidence. And negotiated trust is basically when you can figure out, you've got the sense of reading the room, that you understand that your crews are only doing what they have to do. They are working to the policy, they're working to the procedure. They are not doing anything more than they have to do for their job description. That's going to get somebody killed. You need to move up the line of trust to a level where your crews, number one, listen to each other. Number two, they listen to you. Number three, they have the confidence to tell you when they think you might be wrong. They're looking at the situation the same way you are. They know that you trust them to understand what's happening, and you're feeding off of their experience. And when a crew is starting to work that way, you are reaching a level of trust where you are acting as a true leader. And the emotional intelligence that's involved with being able to accept that, and also to understand what you need to do to change the situation so your crews are working together, that's what I consider to be the most important aspect of the job. And when you start seeing lack of trust showing up in line of duty death reports as a factor in the death, that means that you really need to start paying attention to the level of trust that your crews have in you and that you have in them.
Powerful and well said. I want to throw it to Jeff and Bob to kind of give maybe some thoughts and feedback. And then I still want to hear, before we finish, I'm looking at Joseph Minahan, Michael Bose, and Reno. I've got our cameras on, so I'm kind of voluntolding you. But Jeff and Bob, do you want to give some kind of thoughts, feedback from the recent comments? And then we're going to go Joseph, Michael, Reno.
Yeah, if I could just for a second reach back, I saw the comments, something about how would you work on self-management? I think it plays into all these things that Chief Z and others are saying. And as totally obvious as it sounds, is being a really good listener, trying really hard at that, and really concentrating, because it really, really takes effort. And, one of the things I like to use, and again, for me, my Petri dishes at home, with my kids or, with my wife, is I try to really engage, set my phone aside, make good eye contact, and try to repeat what they're saying, and to gain an understanding of if I'm hearing you right, in if my response is going to go down the right road. So I think that that's really, really important. And organizationally, in a leadership role, I think it's important to really, really listen to your people. And I think that, you know, it's something that's talked about a lot, but I just don't think that there's the right amount of emphasis put on how important that is, and how much effort it really takes to be a good listener. You really, and especially if you can't hear that well, which some of us who've gone through a fire career, like for myself, I really, really have to concentrate. And I think that putting effort into listening, it takes effort, but it's well worth it.
Well said, Jeff. Bob, were you trying to say something? You're on. That's so 2020 of you. You're on mute.
I see what was happening there. Yeah. I was trained in public policy by economists, so forgive me for a minute for being a little econ 101. And I see the question Cindy's brought it up about encouraging leaders, because I mentioned on the front end of this that I'm really concerned about the future of leadership, and really it's more of a quantity and quality challenge. We have a large demand for leaders in the fire service in the future, and we have a very small supply. And so we are at a disequilibrium, and I'm worried about it. And I think all leaders of the fire service should be worried about it, because at the end of the day, we're going to fill positions, managers and administrators, from the fire chief down to the line supervisor. Those positions will be filled by somebody. And I don't know that we've done enough in terms of preparing a new generations for a lot of reasons. A lot of barriers are contributing factors to this scenario. Some of it is rotten culture. Some of it is dinosaur eggs that have hatched, and folks don't want to be part of what it takes to break through that culture. And I get it. I wonder that we're seeing an emergence of second jobs for firefighters who have second jobs again, but less likely to be in the trades and more likely to be in some kind of tech or knowledge work. And they provide leadership. And, many firefighters I know own their own companies, own several companies, and that's where they lead. But they come to the fire station and scratch a different itch. And I don't have enough evidence to suggest there's any linkage to all of this, but I worry about it. And I think we at the Western Fire Chiefs are paying attention to that, and we've got some strategies that we're going to be discussing over the coming months on how to unstuck lower levels. One of the problems we have had is we have bottlenecked leadership positions in collapses of bad economies. We usually cut out support positions or support chiefs to keep fire engines running on the streets. And back from 2007, Jeff, when we did that in Southern Nevada, those positions never came back. And so where are you to go? You otherwise would be a great captain. There's no captain jobs because there's no battalion chief jobs because there's no assistant chief jobs. And I think you get where I'm going. So I'm worried about it. But to answer your question from my perspective, Cindy, about encouraging is to really showcase the great experience that I've had. I've been in executive leadership a third of my career, about 9 years. So I left the line early. I was young when I got in, and I left the line early into leadership, and I've loved every second of it. And we don't do a good job of showcasing what the best parts of being in a leadership position are. We usually just sort of vent about it. So those are some of the ways that I've tried to lead the way.
Thanks, Bob. Sam, I see your hands up, so I'm gonna throw it to you. Kind of keep it short, and then I want to go Joseph, Reno, and Michael. Before we're gonna go a little bit over the hour mark. So Sam, would you?
Sorry, I don't want to hog. I just wanted to sort of put a point in there directly to Bob, because that's something kind of I had a light bulb moment while you were talking, and I had read an article recently that was talking about reasonable child independence laws, which have become this thing, and how fire service has this really deep connection to training children, and how when we worry about this next generation of leaders, this article was basically saying how universities have had to start having like independence classes, and like counselors come in and like give kids reasonable because, and what the sort of summary TLDR of the article was, is like, we raise our kids like we're Italian and they're going to live with us forever. And then we send them away like we're German. And then like we expect all these regular people who are like, oh, you want to be a firefighter, but like you don't know how to turn on a grill, and like what, like just like, where do I start with you? And it gets this like fear building up. So it's just something interesting there, whereas like maybe there's something there with the child independence laws being something that firefighters can advocate for, because it's like the same reasons we started with kids for fire safety, right? And like the same reasons that people actually started wearing seatbelts was because they started making campaigns to kids to ask their parents why they're not wearing their seatbelt. And then that started working. And so it was just like an idea that kind of came to light when you're there. It's like, there's something with that independence younger thing.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Bob. All right, so I'm gonna go Joseph, Michael, then Reno, and then there'll be a little bit past the half hour, and then we'll close up. If there's other stuff, feel free. We'll go a little bit longer. Encourage you all to stay, but Joseph, appreciate your comments. You know, something you want to drop, question, comments. You know, what's your 2 cents on here today?
I think, you know, the biggest thing for me is that I think that everybody seems to be in agreement here that leaders need to be adaptable, right? You need to evolve. You can't, the way that I was brought up in the fire service, and I'm sure I'm looking at a lot of gray hair here, we're brought up the same way, right? We were brought up to do as I tell you, because I tell you, not, you know, don't think for yourself, don't ask questions, eyes and ears open, mouth shut, right? We all heard that coming up in the job. That day's passed. We can't do that anymore, right? This generation, Sam just mentioned it, you know, the independence thing. These kids ask questions, and we need to have the answers for them, and they're going to call you out in your bullshit. And if you don't have an answer, they're going to pull out their smartphone and say, here it is, right? And you're going to lose all your credibility. So I think we need to, you know, so leadership, we need to be accountable for ourselves, right? So if you want to be in charge of someone, you better know what the hell you're doing. Plain and simple, right? You know, you talked a lot about mistakes and owning up to those mistakes, and that, you know, obviously mistakes are natural, right? We screw up, people screw up, but errors of commission are a lot more forgivable than errors of omission, right? When you don't do something and something bad happens, that's a lot worse than trying hard and screwing up, in my opinion. But owning that, right? So mistakes, owning those mistakes, and learning. If you learn from them, great. Hopefully you're going to learn from them. But own up to them, right? Hey, I screwed up. Okay, well, it is what it is. We'll fix it. But thanks for telling me. Right? Don't hide it. That's the worst. Yeah, I mean, everyone said great stuff. Very appreciative of the whole conversation. So thanks for having this.
Joseph, really well said. I'm gonna throw it to Michael, Reno, and then we'll continue to kind of do a final round down. But Michael, thanks for being here. Who tell us who you are, and maybe some comments and feedback on what you heard today.
Yeah, well, hi, everybody. I'm Mike Wass, Executive Director of the Professional Firefighters Wisconsin Charitable Foundation, where we serve as a champion for burn survivors, firefighters, safe communities all across our state. I'm also 22-year veteran of the fire service, last 19 of which with the city of Oshkosh here in Wisconsin. So 2 jobs, things are definitely growing. Definitely a student of the game and love leadership, spend about 40,000 miles a year on the road throughout the state, listening to the audio books and everything else. But missing opportunities, just throwing it out there, do good workers make good managers? Good managers make good leaders. Is it top-down leadership or middle out? I think a lot of our leadership comes from the middle of our organizations. I really enjoyed the discussion here, and I don't know, the chat, if you will. But I think being authentic and putting the time in. I came up on a job that had senior qualified promotions. You had to pass the test, but once you made the list, senior guy got it. I hated that as a young guy getting education and everything else. But something happened, about 8-10 years in my career, where you just picked your head up and you started seeing things you didn't see. So, and then you had to pivot a little bit, and one door closed, another opened, and I wouldn't have gotten where I am today, if you took a different path. So I guess just make the best out of it and go from there. So I guess that's my 2 cents on everything I've heard so far.
Thanks, Michael. Bob, I saw you had your hand up, so if you wanted to add something, then I want to throw it to Reno after a comment from Bob. Then Cindy, I see you're off camera too, so feel free to stick around. We appreciate you being here, but we know you might have to go. But Bob, any comments from what Michael just said, and then we'll go to Reno.
Just celebrating his commitment to a great cause. I was clapping hands.
I'll do snaps for that.
Snaps for that. Reno, to you.
Yeah, no, I'm relatively new to leadership position. I'm probably started last year and hated it because I'm I like to most of the time I feel like introverts and I like to do my research with my computer. At least you understand me, and I always feel like people don't understand me. No, but my approach is try not to do the worst things that have been happening to me with people self-claiming leaders. I had a lot of bad experience and try to use new ways to avoid micromanaging people and let them decide by themselves where they want to go. Most of the time it's because in my leadership role, I can give advice to people, but I'm not their direct manager. So they don't report to me. So eventually I don't even have the possibility to tell them off in a formal way in a meeting. But I can show them if they're doing something silly, why, from my perspective, it's something silly and won't help in their career. And this is mainly with my colleague, but with PhD students, it's much more challenging, and sometimes I don't even know if the answer or how to address some of them, because I live in academia, in a place in which there are people from different culture. Like if you see my PhD student, they come from so many different countries, and sometimes there is also a cultural barrier that I don't understand. If I tell them to do something and they do something else, I don't understand. It's because I have a funny accent, or it's because there is a problem in the chain of language, or it's because they are lazy, or because of that. So in my case, I'm just starting this process, and I'm using my engineering approach, like trial sometime and see if it works and try to readjust. Something that I'm really lucky, and it's a limitation of the fact that they just started, is because I'm relatively young in these leadership roles, and I really hope to reach soon enough experience so I will stop doing things that I will define as a mistake probably down in the line. But my general approach is try to give them responsibility, even to the PhD student, telling them if you fail, it's gonna be your career, not mine. But in some other situation, if they need to help me with a project, it's gonna be my problem as well, because if they don't deliver, that means that I need to do their work. So it's kind of a tricky thing. And thank goodness in my case, it won't be a major disaster. No one is gonna die because we are not handling emergency situation like you guys. So I can afford more mistakes because it's not giving a dramatic impact on the output. If you don't publish a paper, it's not like someone get injured because he doesn't listen to what you're telling them. So from that end, I can say that I'm less stressed out on the fact that someone can screw it up in the people that I'm managing.
Reno, really good thoughts, and I mean, you got to start somewhere. And before I throw it to Cindy, Bob or Jeff or Kirk, anything you wanted to say in regards to what we just heard from Reno or Michael or Joseph's comments? Jeff, you're on mute there.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to chime in. Reno, I think your approach, trial and error, it's spot on. I mean, none of us have the book. We just don't. And I think that if you're willing to accept that you may not have all the right answers, I think that that's the right approach. It's all about, confident humility. If you go in with curiosity and you just really want to help, I think it sets you up. And if you're not so dug in, if you're not so invested on this great idea that you have, and you're ready to move in a different direction, I think that that's a great approach personally, and I think that it's usually received really well. I think the approach where it's my answer, it's my idea, my way or the highway, or come up with another metaphor, is a recipe for disaster. So I think that although you're in a different industry, that's the right approach. Trial and error. I mean, that's how science is born, right? Some people will say if you have a doctorate, you failed the most in a certain area because you've tried so many things and that didn't work, right? And it squeezes you into, okay. And so there's a lot to learn from failure, and trial and error, I just think, is a great approach.
Thanks, Jeff. I want to throw it to Cindy. I see your camera's on, so we're going to finish off with Cindy here, and then I'm going to have Kirk, Jeff, and Bob give some final comments, then we'll round it out here today. So Cindy, welcome, and tell us who you are, or you're with, and your 2 cents here.
So, retired firefighter, paramedic from Anne Arundel, Maryland, founder of the Firefighter Cancer Foundation, over 30 years of cancer research. And my latest hat to add is now back to the 80s as a volunteer firefighter again, helping develop a new EOC program for the town of Castleton, Vermont, and doing PIO and FEMA classes. So this has been interesting because I'm seeing big generational differences and gaps in how communication is effective or ineffective. And it goes back, and I love all the comments and all the feedback, and I look at where all of you are generationally as well, because we can pick out all of those important pieces and how to pull it all together and make it work. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I picked up as far as from tonight that's been most interesting. So thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Well, Kirk, I'm gonna throw it to you. And, kind of allow Kirk to kind of give some his kind of roundup comments, and then Bob and Jeff. And if anyone else kind of has something they want to say, this is being recorded and we'll be sending out a report. But still got 21 people here. Thanks for being here. So Kirk, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking what an honor. There's so much talent on this call, Kevin. I mean, really, Bob and Jeff, great job, but all around, right? I just see so much talent here. On the discussion of that we need another generation of leaders, I remember for a decade, while I was still on the line, discussion about, yes, the captain mentorship program is coming out, the battalion chief mentorship program is coming out, and I know that's universal across the industry. And what I finally decided was, why I can't wait. If I want to promote to captain, I need to do it. And what I would say to, new firefighters, that they want to be engineers. Well, when's the engineer mentoring academy coming out? Dude, you just started today. And they, oh, what do you mean? And I said, you're on. This is how you go to work. The read back discussion on it's easy for us to seek affirmation that our communication was great, but who's the receiver? Are they emotionally available in the moment? They may have the emotional intelligence to hear what we're attempting to communicate, but they may not be in the space to hear it. Or 2 people are in the same room at the same time. They have different receptors. One person affirms me, one person, no way. So what's the read back from them? And then the leader, first this was taught to me, and then I taught it in the middle of the night. To Kevin's point, we're all working together collaboratively. There's 4 a.m, everybody wants to go home. As a captain, I go to the battalion chief, do you have another assignment? And the firefighters that were on trade or overtime were like, what did that guy just do? I said, I showed the boss that I'm here to work. And so when it comes time for shift bid, if you don't want to work in the middle of the morning, don't pick me. And that helps trickle down. Private public partnerships, minimum viable product technology readiness level. So important that we make that good impact the first time around in 360 reviews at the lowest level to the highest level. And that way everybody can stay aware and get the honest thoughts of the whole team. And honor, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kirk. Jeff and Bob.
Well, I'll just say, hey, thanks, Kevin. Thanks for throwing us together. Thanks for letting us chat it up and, share some thoughts and hear from everybody on the call. It's awesome listening to so much experience from so many on this call. And, just thank you. Thanks for having me be a part of the show, having us on.
Gratitude, man. Thank you. Bob?
I echo what Jeff said. Creating this space for us to have a conversation was awesome, and I learned something from everybody who spoke today. I am now more optimistic about the future leadership than I was when I started, so that's fantastic. And I want everyone to, lead with courage, but lead with curiosity and have the courage to experiment. The next, I always give a speech about the future of the fire service and say the folks we're hiring into the organization today in a conventional retirement looking to retire in the year 2050. And when you take a minute to soak in what the year 2050 looks like in the fire service, we know it doesn't look like the year 2040 or 2030 or now. So what are we doing to prepare the fire service and the leaders within it, and how are leaders preparing their workforce to be ready for the integration of the technology changing the way we make decisions? And something Cindy really pointed out that resonated with me is how we communicate, not just with our community, but with our workforce. So the work is out for PIOs on how we evolve and adapt to 4 generations in the workforce, and all whom like to be communicated with a little bit differently. It is a subspecialty that every leader has to have an expert communicator to advise them in. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you all today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're 15 minutes past the hour, but this is a conversation that frankly deserves more. And I have a feeling that we're going to be doing more of these roundtables specifically around this topic. We've also got some other roundtables in the near future, 1 and 2 weeks around the long-term impact of COVID. But we're constantly thinking about some new roundtables that we're looking at. Reno, I'm looking at you as far as kind of another one we're looking at about some using tech for evacuation modeling. We're, frankly,
Don't make it at 4 a.m., please.
yeah, no, we'll do it right at 2 a.m. for you. Maybe 3 a.m., whatever works. No, I'm kidding. But Chief Z and I'm seeing some new names, Bob Reiser and Sarah Alquist. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if you don't have it,
I can volunteer for the next one because I got some exciting news from New Zealand in terms of funding and stuff that we are going to do for safety training with fire extinguisher. So if you want, I can give you a bit of an overview of what we are planning to do, and it will be good to have a feedback from your side because we need people to tell us what they really think about the general idea, because it was assessed by a geek like me. They are no practical person, and it will be good if people that put their hands on the dirt can give us a feedback on what they think, if it's going to be really useful for them.
That's what these forums are for. And so Reno, we'll talk more about that and get it going. So my email's in the chat. I've connected with all of you on LinkedIn. Be on the lookout for a recap from us here in the next 24 to 48 hours. And I'll kind of echo some of the comments. Just gratitude, much appreciation for all of you for being here. This is just not just a moment in time, it's a movement. We need to continue this momentum. And while all of you are in this chat, we agree, I need you all to continue to be louder outside of this chat. Because that's what we need, louder in the respectful, authentic, right kind of manner. And I know you all will be. So you've got my information. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you again for your time and being here today. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. It was great.
See ya.
Thank you again.
Thank you.